tourism, economy, and regulation, politics at the crossroads of prosperity. You can adjust the language according to your preference. Choose the program that suits your needs from the playlist. Customize the subtitle position on your laptop, and adjust the video speed with the slider to suit your needs and comfort. Let's grow together through your subscribe and like on this video.
Economic instability can debase a national currency and weaken investor confidence. In such moments, analysts work to debunk exaggerated claims and to claim structural weaknesses in tourism governance. Capital may slide down a fiscal declivity if policymakers fail to respond in a decorous and responsible manner. Leaders must deem reform not as an option, but as a necessity. Scandals can deface a nation's international reputation. Without prudent oversight, governments may default on obligations and erode financial stability. Citizens traditionally showed deference to democratic institutions. Yet, some officials attempt to deflect accountability when crises unfold. Corruption produces deleterious effects that spread across sectors. Regulators must delimit authority clearly and delineate operational boundaries to prevent abuse. A populist demagogue may demur when confronted with evidence or denigrate critics to distract public attention. However, reliable statistics must denote reality rather than serve as tools to deride opponents with derivative rhetoric. Tourism policy cannot be built on manipulation. Unregulated expansion may desiccate fragile ecosystems and exhaust local resources. Debate becomes desultory when leadership grows detached from public concern. Sanctions and legal penalties operate as deterrent mechanisms, yet cultural heritage may appear diaphanous when subjected to aggressive commercialization. Opposition leaders may deliver a fiery diatribe about the dichotomy between profit and preservation. Ministers may respond by invoking a policy dictum in a didactic tone, attempting to instruct rather than engage. Some observers remain diffident, uncertain whether promises will materialize. Information may diffuse slowly through bureaucratic channels, particularly when officials digress and dilate on peripheral issues. Adopting a dilatory approach criticized by every dilettante commentator seeking instant solutions. Public discourse can resemble a political dirge when trust deteriorates. Economists attempt to disabuse communities of unrealistic expectations and foster a more discerning understanding of fiscal reality. Yet scandals remain discomfiting, and alliances become discordant under pressure. False narratives discredit institutions and widen the discrepancy between official statements and lived experience. Effective reform requires discrete policy measures and discriminating oversight. Politicians who act disingenuously or claim to be disinterested despite clear affiliations appear disjointed and unreliable. Governments must not dismiss legitimate criticism nor disparage marginalized groups. Regions often possess disparate economic capacities, demanding dispassionate evaluation. Administrators should dispatch emergency assistance efficiently and disperse resources equitably. Guided by ethical disposition rather than political calculation, persistent inequality remains disquieting. Leaders who dissemble erode public confidence. Educational initiatives can disseminate financial literacy and reduce dissent before institutional dissolution or social dissonance intensifies. Tourism frequently strengthens participation in the distaff economy, empowering women, entrepreneurs, and small enterprises. Markets may distend during speculative booms, but crises eventually distill hard lessons about resilience and diversification. At critical junctures, governments must not dither. Delay transforms solvable problems into systemic collapse. Ultimately, tourism, the economy, and regulation intersect within a dynamic political landscape. When governance is transparent, when accountability is institutionalized, and when policy balances growth with sustainability, tourism becomes more than revenue generation. It evolves into a stabilizing pillar of national development. The challenge for modern states is neither to romanticize nor to demonize tourism. Instead, leaders must integrate economic insight with environmental stewardship, ensuring that prosperity does not compromise cultural integrity. Political courage, institutional discipline, and inclusive dialogue remain the foundation for resilient tourism economies. The future of tourism policy depends upon strategic foresight, ethical leadership, and unwavering commitment to equitable development. Reform is not a singular event, but a continuous process. Nations that confront crisis with clarity rather than confusion will transform tourism from a source of volatility into a platform for long-term prosperity. Tourism has the power to elevate or abase a nation's dignity. When managed wisely, economic tensions may abate. But when leaders abdicate responsibility, policies become aberrant and public trust falls into abeyance. Many citizens abhor corruption and abjure political movements whose rhetoric becomes abrasive rather than constructive. Governments must remain abreast of global competition and avoid abridging opportunity through excessive regulation. Sudden withdrawal of investment resembles economic abscission, and when capital absconds into offshore accounts, officials should not abstain from intervention. Otherwise, entire regions risk falling into an economic abyss. When states accede to international tourism agreements, capital accretion often follows. Yet critics may adopt an acerbic or acidulous tone, arguing that prosperity benefits only elites at the acme of power. Grassroots activism demands fiscal acumen and insists that governments adhere to environmental standards. Experts admonish policymakers not to adulterate data and carefully adumbrate long-term structural risks. Regulatory systems must address adverse impacts and advocate for inclusive growth. In mountain villages, tourism lodges perch like an eyrie overlooking valleys, blending economic expansion with aesthetic integrity. Some ministers appear affable, yet their charm may be mere affectation. Investors frequently attempt to aggrandize flagship projects, but national prosperity is an aggregate of multiple sectors. Communities respond with alacrity, albeit cautiously. Fearing that policies may alienate residents rather than alleviate poverty, leaders sometimes remain aloof, reluctant to amalgamate local wisdom with global capital flows. Regulations may appear ambiguous, leaving investors ambivalent and hesitant. Reform efforts aim to ameliorate inequality while governments attempt to amortize infrastructure debt. Outdated tourism models may seem like an anachronism in a rapidly digitized world. Emergency stimulus provides temporary analgesia, yet tourism cycles are analogous to tides. They inevitably rise and fall. Without oversight, markets risk descending into anarchy, compelling courts to annul dubious contracts. Political speeches may sound anodyne when leaders anoint new flagship destinations, but crises often reveal systemic anomalies. When politicians antagonize critics, they ignore warnings that frequently antedate disaster. Growth and preservation are often portrayed as antithetical forces, generating public apathy. Claims of tourism miracles are sometimes apocryphal. Reformers who become apostates from rigid economic ideologies may transform into apostles of sustainability. Transparent budgeting is appropriate in tourism governance. Authorities must apprise citizens of public spending and seek approval for appropriate fiscal decisions. Independent courts act as arbiters in disputes, clarifying arcane regulations rooted in archaic traditions. Communities express ardent hope for progress, though reform remains arduous. No official should arrogate unchecked authority. Policymakers must articulate their strategies clearly and safeguard every cultural artifact without romanticizing an artless version of the past.